Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Parental Stress Centre's live webinar on aggression and autism. Hope you guys are all doing really awesome this evening and are ready for a jam-packed hour full of information, plus our Q&A at the end. So tonight's webinar takes a little bit of a snapshot of some of the content, like there's only so much that we can teach you in an hour, that we teach in our 9-week autism program. So we've worked with over 3,500 families. I think we're very close to 4,000 families now with autistic children, addressing challenges like high anxiety, aggression, school avoidance, and we do this through our flexible online program. But don't worry, this isn't going to be a whole hour of us promoting our program. I never like to do that. I always want to leave you with loads of content. But just to give you a bit of a snapshot, we work with you and your mental health. We work with understanding what's going on for your child, making sense of what's going on for your child. We work on overcoming barriers like meltdowns, shutdowns, anxiety, PDA, school avoidance, sibling rivalry, other family dynamics like marital conflict or relationship conflict, and aggressive behaviours, which you'll get a little bit more insight into tonight. And then, of course, building skills and connection, relationships, emotional regulation. So it's kind of a very comprehensive understanding of autism with loads and loads of tools that you walk away with. Now, let me just check that you guys are seeing me okay. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Loud and clear. Beautiful. Thanks, Marilyn. If anyone I can see. Yes, Kathy. Great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you giving me that feedback. But now, just a little bit about myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jackie Hall. I'm the founder of the Parental Stress Centre. We've been supporting parents since 2007. Parents with stress, depression, anxiety, helping them with their child's behaviour. For the last 4 years, we've worked almost exclusively on helping parents with autistic children through that self-paced program and counselling support. I also founded our sister program, Safe to Grow, which is our professionals. I'll talk about that a little bit later. I am a qualified counsellor with the Australian Counselling Association. I have a graduate certificate in education specialising in autism. I am a trauma-sensitive heart math certified practitioner, soon to be one of their actual trainers. So really excited to bring that to the autism community because it's all about regulation tools, and it's just going to be a game changer for families, for parents, and for their children in learning heart math techniques. I have worked in mental health for the last 16 years, so I bring that kind of trauma-informed element to it because I've worked with trauma, anxiety, depression, personality disorders, eating disorders, and drug and alcohol addictions, as well as also working in residential youth care with autistic children who obviously have coexisting complex kind of backgrounds. I'm trained in EMDR therapy as well, which is an awesome kind of trauma recovery technique. And I have authored 5 books and am a mother of 2 adult teenage sons. I am getting on in age and my children are over 18 now. So that's a little bit about me, just so you know that, I know a little bit about what I'm going on about, but I don't always claim to know everything. We're learning things from our parents all the time. You guys are teaching me as much as I'm teaching you, so it's a very much a collaborative effort. Okay, so tonight when we're thinking about aggression, we need to be aware of 2 different types of aggression. There's proactive aggression and reactive aggression. Now, proactive aggression is more along the lines of what we think of as a tantrum. And a tantrum is very kind of deliberate and goal-orientated. So your child's cognitions, so their thinking process are very dominant. They're online. They're thinking about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what the outcome's going to be. So be very aware that they're thinking with logic and reasoning skills. Even if they're young, they don't have those logic and reasoning skills yet. It's still about testing out an outcome. It's still about kind of assessing what's going on. Am I going to get the result that I want? Do I need to shift my behavior in order to get what I want? So it's very much deliberate. Whereas reactive is emotional. It's where there's this loss of control, this emotional flooding, and it's like an expressive aggression. And it's not always, they're not in control at this point. And that's what we refer to as a meltdown. A meltdown is reactive aggression and tantrums are proactive aggression. So it's important to understand those two, because obviously if it's proactive aggression, we might be able to use a little bit more logic and reasoning with our child than we are able to with a meltdown, and when it's emotional, and there's different approaches. So we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on that reactive aggression in this webinar, but we do address it kind of in our programming and other things that we do when we're talking about proactive. Now, before we do that, excuse me, I'm just choking on myself. I want you to, whenever we're talking about any kind of challenges that we're having with our children, whether they're autistic or not, we're always talking about two topics. We're talking about you and your response and them and theirs. So what we like to do at the Parental Stress Centre is think about how you're thinking, feeling, and behaving to certain experiences in your life, certain events with your life, whether it's your children, outside of your children. And we do that before we jump into the world of your child and understand what they might be thinking and feeling. And the reason why we do that is because the more self-awareness that we have, the more understanding of how we think and how that connects with how we feel and how that connects with how we behave and how thinking, feeling, and behaving all connect with each other, the more we're able to kind of transfer that information onto our child and get a sense of what they're thinking and what they're feeling and why it makes sense they're behaving the way that they are. So in every event, we experience it with the 5 senses. See it, hear it, touch it, taste it, smell it. Sensory information is going into their brain for evaluation. Part of that evaluation process is identifying whether what I'm experiencing is pleasurable or painful. And based on that evaluation, it's going to issue 2 responses. The first one is how I'm going to behave in order to reinstate pleasure and avoid further pain, and how I feel about that situation. So every time we have a thought, we release chemicals into the body that we kind of feel and we recognize as emotions. So our physical feelings are our emotions. We've just learned to label them. So that's where that kind of evaluation, the thinking, triggers our feelings, triggers our behaviors, and they all trigger each other. So what we tend to do, let's look at it from an evaluation perspective. As we're experiencing our life with those 5 senses and we're checking in with our evaluation process, what tends to happen is we tend to the brain looks for reference points of what we've experienced before, what beliefs we've drawn from those experiences. And primarily from the age of around 0 to 7, we've kind of formed our perception of life, our perception of who we're supposed to be or who we think we're supposed to be, how to see ourselves in terms of our self-worth, what to attach our self-worth to, what makes us pursue pleasure and avoid pain. We've got a lot of life experience by the time we're parents to kind of get a sense of what we believe and who we believe we are. So our parents, family, environment, media, culture, religion, education, all of our experiences tend to create this kind of picture of how we expect things to be in life. And so if we kind of put our own hats on and we kind of think about what some of those expectations are or some of those beliefs that you have about life in relation to parenting, you'll find that you have a whole stack of kind of parental expectations that either you created before you had kids and had any clue what parenting was going to be like, or somewhere along the line on the way to parenting, or now that you are a parent, you've created these expectations that you think I must reach these expectations, or I think I should be experiencing life this way in order for me to feel like I'm worthy enough or good enough or life is good enough or I'm doing a good enough job as a parent. Now, some of these expectations can be minor and some of them can be major life expectations. So little things like, I can have an expectation that my kids are going to listen the first time that I say things. So we often talk about stress being a conflict between belief, what I'm thinking, and reality. But, kids listening the first time, no conflict with reality there, right? Because the reality is kids don't always listen the first time, and there's always reasons behind that, but we need to kind of understand what our reaction is. Other expectations is that sometimes we can have a picture of what happy or normal kids might look like to you in a family. It can drill down to housework expectations, any kind of right life or right pathway we think our children are supposed to be on. It can be when you have a child who's diagnosed with autism, that there's all of a sudden all these right pathways that you think that you need to be on to make sure your child's life is right. So you're making sure that you apply all of the right therapies and making sure you don't get anything wrong and making sure you're keeping your child happy and not damaging them. And, sometimes even thinking that before they had that diagnosis, there were all these things that I did, and why did I do all that? So now I'm trying to make amends and make sure I get nothing wrong. And we put all this pressure on ourselves. So you can see that we get all of these ideas on what we're supposed to do. We put so much pressure on ourselves to get life right. And then what tends to happen is when life isn't going to plan and we're not ticking these boxes and following this right path, we tend to then get into what we call 4 stressful thinking lenses. And everyone who experiences stress experiences this story that's wrapped up in these 4 lenses. I haven't met anybody who's experienced stress yet in the whole 20 years that I've been doing this that hasn't rolled around in these stories, myself included. So what tends to happen is we start to first notice that life isn't going right, that there's something wrong going on. And then the brain starts to look for evidence of, how do I know it's going wrong? Because of all the things that I'm missing out on. I'm missing out on respect. I'm missing out on experiences. I'm missing out on time with my child. My child is missing out on certain experiences that, I think they should be having in order for their life to be right, or even for their experiences they should be having for my life to be right. And then the reasoning part of the brain kicks in and goes, well, why am I on this wrong path? Why am I missing out on all these things? And it determines that I should have, or my child should have, or someone else should have done something differently or should be doing something differently. So we have this kind of blame on ourselves and others. And then it all kind of spirals down into this core belief: what does this mean? What does this mean about me? And we have this kind of value judgment that we put on it, that I feel worth less in some way because life isn't going to plan, because I'm missing out on certain experiences, and because I should have behaved differently, or someone else should have behaved differently, or perhaps made different decisions. So it's being aware of this kind of story that we tend to tell ourselves, and recognizing how that tends to move into how we're feeling about ourselves, and then how we're then behaving because we're thinking and feeling that way. And that can stem to just little minor interruptions throughout your morning that tend to kickstart these 4 lenses, or it can be that you're rolling around in this story repetitively about many different areas of your life. So the first key is just being really aware of, where do you, and feel free to put it in the chat, where do you see yourself, looking at life through these 4 lenses? And all 4 of them will be there, don't worry. Some of them will be more dominant than others, but all 4 of them will be there within your story, and they're all in conflict with reality. We're needing to assess the way that we're viewing things so that we can then change that. So what we want to do is, once we start to recognize that our thought processes do think this way, we need to then jump into the world of our child and realize that sometimes they're thinking like that as well. And that's triggering some of these aggressive behaviors that you might be seeing. So I want to kind of jump out of the world for a minute and jump into the world of your child, so we can spend the rest of the webinar understanding, or get you out of the hot seat and we'll get you starting to jump into the world of your child and kind of understand what they might be thinking and feeling in order to be behaving the way that they are. And because when we always ask this question, what must they be thinking to be feeling? What must they be thinking and feeling to be behaving this way? That's the question we're always asking, because this behavior that you're seeing, whatever it is, whether it's aggressive or not, is going to be making sense to your child. Maybe not even from a logical point of view, sometimes even from a survival point of view, but in some way or other, it's making sense to your child's body to be behaving the way that they are. Now, just to go a little bit further with understanding how information works in the brain, I like to use Dr. Daniel Siegel's hand model of the brain. Some of you are going to be already familiar with this, but I'm going to go over it for those of you who aren't. So basically the information comes in obviously through those 5 senses: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. If you think of the brain as like the hand, I was going to do the hand on your hand, as your hand, and we have this kind of survival part of the brain where it's responsible for all of your unconscious processes, where your digestion, heart rate, breathing, all of those things that you don't have to think about. And then we have the emotional brain, and then we have the rational brain. And if you fold it all over like that, it looks a little bit like a brain, right? So as the information is coming through the 5 senses, it's coming to this little place, let's say it's here, called the thalamus. And the seeing, hearing, touching, tasting comes through the thalamus first. The sense of smell goes directly to the emotional brain. And the thalamus sends that information that you're sensing both to the emotional brain and up here to the rational brain. And the emotional brain is going, hey, what is this that we see here, touch, taste, smell? Have we seen it before? Do we have a reference point? Do we have opinion? And it checks in with the hippocampus down here that's stored all of your memories and your belief systems, whether they're conscious or not, and goes, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean about me? So this is where if you've got lenses in there, they're going to be coming up and they're going to be identifying that life's going wrong, life's missing out, and you should have done this, you should have done that, and you're worthless because of it, or not good enough for some reason or another. So if it's bringing up this story, right, and at this point, the information's still traveling up to the brain, because look how close the emotional brain is compared to the rational brain all the way up here. So we're effectively perceiving things emotionally before we're perceiving them rationally. And if the emotional brain is detecting that there is some sort of threat in the environment based on how I've perceived that event, it's going to start to send information down to your nervous system. And the nervous system can start to then activate your fight or flight response, which is going to activate the sympathetic nervous system. There's 2 channels, and the sympathetic nervous system is about jumping into some sort of action. Let's get out of here. Let's fight our way through it. And when it does that, there's a whole lot of physical processes that happen that affect the immune system, digestion, cortisol, melatonin, all of those sorts of things. One of the main things I want you to know is that it actually stops sending or compromises blood being sent to the rational part of the brain. So effectively, even like in a normal situation where we go, there's a spider, there's a threat, the rational brain will go, it's okay, it's nowhere near me, it's outside, we're okay. And the emotional and rational are working together. But if there's a big threat, based on how I've perceived something, that rational brain will actually go offline, and it's what we call flipping our lid. So your child is not rational during those times. They can't think straight. They can't take on your lessons. They can't understand anything new. They're just trying to survive. They're responding like they would if they were being chased by a lion. And when you're being chased by a lion, it's not a time to analyze. It's not a time to use logic and reasoning. It's just a time to get the hell out of there or fight my way out or do whatever the body needs me to do in order to survive. So it's not logical and it's not conscious. So when your child is behaving the way that they are, let's say they're hitting you or they're doing something morally inappropriate or something they know is wrong, they don't have a choice in that moment when they're in that reactive meltdown, because in that reactive meltdown, those cognitions are offline. They're not thinking straight. They're not using logic, reasoning, morals, and all of those sorts of things. They're just using, their body has gone into an automatic pilot that just chooses the outcome that's going to get them the best result to avoid pain and get back to the equilibrium of being safe and or even pleasurable or just homeostasis. So it's a very primal response that's going on in your child's body, which helps us to make sense of that behavior and stop personalizing it. Because sometimes when we see our kids, it doesn't make it any less challenging, by the way, but it does help you not to personalize what's going on for your child because you realize that their body's going into this survival response. Now, I want to do a quick detour just to kind of bring trauma into the conversation, because I, again, love Daniel Siegel's very simple explanation of trauma, which is an experience we have that overwhelms our capacity to cope. So I want to break that down for you, that it's overwhelming our capacity to cope. So if your child doesn't have the capacity to cope, they're going to start to feel this kind of panicky, this overwhelm, and that starts to bring about that traumatic feeling. Whether something is traumatic to a person or not depends on their ability, so the resources that they have to be able to handle that situation. They don't have the resources and they don't know when it's going to stop. They don't know how to get out of that situation. That can feel very scary to a child. It can feel very unsafe. It's going to trigger that nervous system. Even the reactions they have when that nervous system is triggered can be traumatizing because of the whole situation and how it ends up unfolding, which can then lead afterwards to a lot of shame and a lot of self-worth stuff. So I'm going to highlight what we can do in those situations after the event as well. So it's important to recognize that trauma is going to have this response of, fight or flight. And sometimes even they can go into like a freeze response, because it's not always an aggressive response that you might see. You might see a shutdown response. You might see dissociation. You might see withdrawal. This kind of, if you think about what lizards do and they just kind of play dead, that they could go internally within themselves. So being aware of what happens with your child when they feel overwhelmed with their capacity to cope. Because if they're repetitively going into those situations over and over again, it's going to add to the trauma. It's going to start to become long-term trauma. And this is very easily triggered in an autistic child because so many things in life are very confusing. So when we're talking about helping an autistic child, we need to look at it from two different approaches. We need to the first priority, first and foremost, is training the nervous system to feel safe. If you've repetitively got your child going through really stressful, difficult situations, and then their sympathetic nervous system, their fight or flight response is always agitated, always aggravated, then the cells in the body literally get trained into that state of being. It becomes normal to feel heightened and agitated and angry or irritable. And it becomes, for some children, they have never known anything but that. So it's not even about training, like retraining the nervous system. It's training the nervous system to feel calm, to feel safe, so that thinking brain can come online and they can learn and they can use that logic and reasoning, or learn to use that logic and reasoning, so they don't get worked up. So we're looking at a top-down, bottom-up approach. And a lot of the time we're starting with the bottom-up approach, where we're talking about you co-regulating with your child through your calm, your facial movements, tone of voice, body language, your emotional regulation. So that might involve, part of your strategy is learning how to train your own nervous system to be in a calm state, because a lot of parents have kind of had so many experiences of difficult situations themselves that their own nervous system has been activated so many times that it's now become your default and your baseline of how your nervous system feels. So it might be that part of it is actually helping you to feel safe and regulate your own nervous system, but then also co-regulating with your child so that you can help them with their nervous system. And then the top-down approach. So working on the mind to think more rationally, changing belief systems, looking at the stories that our child is telling themselves about situations, helping them with different perspectives, which is particularly important in autism, because sometimes their perspectives on life can be either narrow-minded or misunderstood or confused. So we need to be having many conversations that address that top-down approach. So we're helping them to think about themselves and life and other people and their interactions differently. Healing trauma, healing ongoing stress, is going to use top-down and bottom-up approaches as well. Now, how am I going for time? I'm doing okay. I've got to keep myself in check, because otherwise Christy gets cranky at me. She doesn't really. It's just that I can go over. So anyway, I just wasted 20 seconds telling you that. Okay, so let's move on to the different phases of escalating behaviours that lead to aggression. So this section is going to help you to kind of break down aggression and look at what you can do in these different phases so you're not dealing with like a full-blown meltdown. There are certain things you can do on the way to the meltdown that can prevent it or disarm it or like stop it altogether from happening. Now, I like to use this stress model of crisis that I learnt when I was doing residential youth care. So some of you professionals may be familiar with this diagram. It's adapted from the Therapeutic Crisis Intervention Program, and basically it talks about the different stages. So there's pre-crisis state, there's a triggering event, there's escalation, and then there's outburst, and then after that is recovery. So let's start looking at each one of those phases. The first one is, and this is what you want to become really familiar with, and start doing the detective work with your child, making sense of the patterns of their behavior, the way they think, the way they feel, the way they behave when they're at baseline. Now, often we are really good at looking at what they're doing when they're challenged, when they're behaving in a certain way, but what's working for them? There's so much clues, there's so much value in understanding what's working for them at that time, that they're calm, that they are at that baseline. And everyone's baseline is going to be different. So a child might be slightly heightened, and that is their baseline. So be aware that their baseline is not necessarily your expectation, your viewpoint of what a baseline is, right? Because it's not all sort of calm, serene, quiet, obeying, doing the right thing, and all of these little stories that we run about what children should be doing. So pre-crisis, we want to have a look at, when they're in that pre-crisis state, when they're in that calm baseline state, what are they wearing? What's the temperature like? What's the noise levels like? We want to look at all of it. We want to look at their emotions, what's going on for them emotionally, what could sometimes start to move into them being overtired, or, are they in the process of masking? Like what's going on before they kind of start to kick off into that meltdown direction? What's going on in their environment? Is the room too hot? Is there too much stimulation? Too many unpredictable situations? When they're in that baseline state, is it the opposite? Is the room at the right temperature? Is there like minimal stimulation? Is there predictable situations going on for them? What does baseline look like for your specific child or the child that you're working with? What's their tone of voice like? What's their volume of voice like? What's their facial expressions like? What sort of behaviors do you see when they're at that baseline? And their body language. What does their body language look like? Is it hunched over? Is it straightened? Is it, what their body's going to be telling you a lot about how they're feeling. And all of these things are particularly important for non-speaking kids that aren't necessarily going to tell you or can't tell you what's going on for them. The more information you have, the better it will be in being able to discover what the patterns of their behavior are. And this is really important, especially for professionals as well. Ask the parents. If you're not sure about this particular child, ask the parents, because they will know the tiniest little details of what is going on in their child. Like it can be a look, it can be some sort of tone of voice change, it can be the tiniest little thing that this child just switches and they've gone into that trigger. There's been a triggering event. They've gone from baseline to triggering event. So if you can catch those little nuances and find out about them early, then you can possibly prevent a meltdown, not only that you have to deal with, because often we're thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm trying to prevent these meltdowns so that I don't have to deal with them. But more importantly, so the child doesn't have to deal with them, because they don't want to be melting down either. They don't want to have these emotional outbursts that are absolutely exhausting and sometimes fill them full of shame, guilt, and make them feel further ostracized from a situation than they already do. And we don't want that for our little kiddies. And also looking at what activities are associated with that baseline behavior as well. And then the next phase is the triggering event. So when your child is triggered by something, they start to feel a little bit agitated. They start to get a little bit heightened. How do we know? What are the signs? What's going on? How do they move from that baseline? Looking at all the same things that we looked at in that baseline, but starting to recognize what certain things trigger them. Is it the environment? Is it what they're wearing? Is it the noise or the sensory overload or understimulation going on for them? Is it, do we know that they're triggered by how they're thinking, what they're saying, facial expressions, body language, all of those sorts of things. But when you detect it, even if you don't know what exactly triggered it at that point, you want to start with co-regulation. You want to start to be regulated yourself. So slow your own breathing down so that you can stay in a state, keep your nervous system in a state of calm. Use your body, use your tone of voice, breathe, be that source of calm yourself. At this point, their cognitions are online still, so you may be able to use direction or distraction or conversation to be able to help them to work through it, or to move into something else, or to problem solve with them or for them in some situations. Always try to help problem solve with them if you can, because that's going to help them to learn. But sometimes it's just about dropping your expectations of what they can do and solving the problem for them. We can help them with skills building later on. It just depends. Like, you're going to have to discern what's needed in that situation. But above all, you want to look at being empathetic and validating and acknowledge them. Everybody wants to feel like we get you. We all want to feel understood and heard. So we want to be saying things like, I understand that's disappointing for you. I understand that's really upsetting. Oh my gosh, this is really hard, isn't it? Or I'm sorry that didn't happen the way you wanted to. That's horrible. Like, just really resonating with their feelings, like their feelings are valid. So we want to kind of acknowledge that that's how they're feeling and that's how they're thinking. So that sometimes can disarm things straight away when they see that, hey, there's somebody here for me. I'm not in this alone. They get me. They understand me. And that's something you're going to use throughout all of these different phases. The next phase is the escalation stage. So this is where we're starting to go, these thinking is going offline, and the emotions are starting to escalate. The rage is starting to stack up. That amygdala is getting hijacked, is going to start to hijack that rational brain. So it's getting harder and harder to talk logic and reasoning skills. So this is where we've got to maintain those co-regulation strategies. So you want to have kind of soothing gestures, tone, body language. Start to think about your kind of proximity to the child. Like, you don't want to be kind of tower overing them. You might want to get down to their level a little bit more. Sometimes it can even be helpful if you sit on the ground while they're standing up, because it just means like it's that they've got control, they've got the power, especially if they feel like things are out of control. It might be that you need to soften your voice. It might need that you need to match their energies. So it's going to be playing around with these different co-regulation strategies that will help them to kind of work through what's going on for them before those cognitions completely go offline. So while we're doing this, we want to really try to understand the child's perspective. Again, offering that empathy, validation, acknowledgement, we get you. Make that the essence of what you're saying to that child above and beyond everything else. Avoid that conflict cycle. So we get stuck in this cycle of something happens, they react, or they're thinking about something in a certain way, they react in a certain way. You see the crime in their behavior of how they've reacted, and then you react in a certain way, and then they react because you're reacting, and you react because they're reacting, and round and round and round you go. So don't try to make your child wrong in this stage. We just want to help them through this situation. You may not even try to solve the problem at this point, because if their cognitions are going offline, you can very much trigger them to go over the edge, and then you're spending sometimes, minutes to hours trying to bring that nervous system back online. So you can teach, you can repair later on, but not now. We just need to get through that moment. Think about what they need in this moment. Do they just need some time away? Do they need some extra help? Do they need a caring gesture where you're just going to do something for them, or do something that makes them feel like they're loved, or they're looked after, or they're cared for, just because you do care for them? So sometimes that can be disarming too, where you're just kind of really supportive and encouraging, and they feel like you're on their team. At this point, the priority is starting to become more about that nervous system. Breathing exercises may be helpful to them and you, mindfulness, coming back to that present moment. If they're in an anxiety kind of meltdown, they'll be looking at a potential future, something that could go wrong, worried about what's going to go wrong. When we're looking at the future, we're not looking at the present. When we're looking for evidence of being unsafe, we're not looking for evidence of being safe. So sometimes we need to help them to just kind of take a step back, come over here, away from the target or away from the situation, and actually just go, we're okay. I'm here with you. Let's take some breaths. Let's think about this situation, or not even think about it. Let's just look for evidence of our surroundings that we're okay. Sometimes it might just be that they can feel something, feel that they're okay. They can be touching a toy. They can be in an area of the room that is designated as like a calm down space, but you're with them, and you're helping them to regulate their nervous system and look for evidence in their present environment. See what senses we have available at this point, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, that is going to help them to come back into that present moment and really be with the safety in the room. We're okay. It's all good. We will work it out. Like nice encouraging words, but don't be saying too much at this point, because too many words, the thinking brain's starting to go offline. They can't process that many words. So very minimal talk that's starting to happen in this escalation phase. The other thing that we're needing to do is, kind of subtly manage the environment. So I know that when I was in resi care, the young boy that I was working with, he would get his Nerf gun and he would load it up and he would just start shooting his co-tenant just repetitively, and she would have to lock herself in the room, and so I would just go and hide the bullets without him noticing as he was starting to kick off, because his attention is in his own world of emotions and anger and whatever's going on for him. So he would notice that I'm starting to manage the environment. One of the things that I would do is actually turn all the essential oil diffusers on in the house that I had set up, because emotion is the quickest way to the nervous system. Because remember, when we're seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, the sensory information of smell goes directly to the emotional brain and bypasses that thalamus. So sometimes it's the easiest way to regulate is by essential oils. And it was something that he would actually even ask for, even at bedtime, because he could feel what that did to his nervous system. So I would subtly do that. I would also hide the coffee because he would like to, when he got angry, he would like to load himself up with coffee, because he knew that if he did that, he would be up all night, and that would mean that the caretaker, myself, the youth worker, would have to be up all night with him. So he would do that. Just, some of that was proactive behavior, not necessarily reactive behavior. So it's also important too, which I forgot to mention, is that proactive behavior, what can start off with proactive behavior, can actually lead into reactive behavior. So he may have started off with a tantrum. He may be very deliberate in his actions. His cognitions are online, but he would work himself up so much that he would then get himself into that meltdown stage. And he had a look in his face that you could actually, and the sound in his voice, that you could hear the switch, and you could see that you'd lost him to the meltdown. You had to change tactics from any kind of logic or reasoning or trying to talk him out or redirect, all of those things, and switch over into working with his nervous system and helping him to be in that calmer state, and knowing that we need to talk about things later, not now. We need to work on what happened later. So managing the environment's a very important one in this escalation stage. It's also what's important in that outburst stage as well, where this is where the rational brain is completely offline now. We're fully into that reactive aggression, can't think rationally, can't hear your logic and reasoning, can't learn. This is where you might start to see violent behaviours or threatening violence towards others, self-harm, property damage, abusive, shouting, yelling. We want to try, at this point where we've got our attention on their nervous system, we want to help them to drain off their emotions. So the body often shows you what it's needing to do, what it's trying to do. If you think about the body as an instinctive kind of animal, because that's what we are, we're animals. We're just human animals that has a thinking brain. But when we go into that survival mode, we might as well be like that Giselle running away from that lion. We're in pure instinctive survival mode. So we need to be working with that nervous system to help that body feel safe, to help that body drain off that pent-up emotion that they're feeling. And often the body will start to try to move away or throw something or hit something. It's trying to express that energy out. So we want to help the child to kind of do that. We might have to move them away from the situation to be able to do it, but it's about helping them to drain off their emotions. Sometimes it's even helping them to talk it out instead of acting it out. Let them shout, yell, scream. Like, if you can take them aside, let them have their say. Stay calm and regulated in your state of nervous system regulation. You want to be saying very little. I understand. Tell me more. Words like that are validating. I know, sweetheart. I know it's hard. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh gosh, I never looked at it that way. Like, again, want to be seen, want to be heard. That's going to start to make them feel like, hey, someone's on my side. Someone's listening to me. This person is not a threat to me. They're not adding to the threat. I'm calm with this person, or I'm safe with this person firstly. And when you're safe, you can calm down. If you think about that Giselle kind of running away from the lion, that they're able to, because they don't have the thinking brain, when they run away from the lion, they're successful in running away from the lion, they just go back to grazing in the fields, and the nervous system starts to come back down because they're no longer in threat. They're no longer being chased. They can be, they feel safe. They then can feel safe to calm down. The nervous system can actually unwind. So you can be that for your child. And look, in saying all of this as well, this is all great in an ideal world when you've got that time to be one-on-one. It's not always easy. I get that, and I know that everything that I'm saying here is kind of simplifying everything. Like, it's a simple way of saying it, basically. And there's a lot of complexities that we need to add into all of this, which is why it's really valuable that during our program we have those interactions with me where you can ask those questions. But for tonight we have a Q&A session afterwards, so hopefully I can address some of the questions about what we're talking about today. So the final stage, and perhaps one of the most important stage, is recovery, repair, and connect or reconnect. So this only occurs when the child has come back to baseline and that rational brain is back online. It may not even be that day. It may be the next day. It might be later on that night when they're kind of going to sleep and you're able to kind of have a little bit of a chat. We need to help them to repair the relationship if there was something going on with you. We need to help them to kind of make sense of what happened and kind of reconnect and learn from what actually transpired. This is sometimes a little bit tricky, and there's a few different approaches that we need to use with this, because the child is often feeling that sense of shame and guilt and has their own value judgments and their own lenses going on. When that rational, think about for a second, think about when you have had a situation where you've lost the plot or you've overreacted at something, and you've flipped your lid, cognitions are nowhere to be seen, and then the event is over, you calm down, the thinking brain comes back online and goes, what the hell did you do that for? Like, you shouldn't have done that. You should have said this, this, and this. You shouldn't have behaved like that. You know better than that. No one's going to like you if you keep behaving like that. You've just made the situation worse. Everything's going to be terrible now. You start running this narrative that is along the lines of those four lenses, and you start to feel bad about that situation. And often when that happens, what do? You go talk to someone. or you find a way to learn from it, resolve, or to bounce back and build your kind of resilience up as to what you can do. But kids don't always know how to do that. And so we need to help them to kind of repair and reflect on that. And that's going to require a lot of rapport that you have with your child, and a lot of kind of emotional coaching that you're going to use. As different kinds of ways that you can get into that conversation, because a lot of parents are kind of going, well, they don't want to talk about it, which is understandable, because when I talk about it, I feel shame again, I feel worthless again, I don't want to do it. So we have to think of different approaches that we can use to help them. But yeah, repair, recovery, connect, it's all about looking at what happened, teaching them better coping skills, looking at what we can do next time and how we can regulate that nervous system. So another thing we need to bring into conversation is the potential that there could be pathological demand avoidance. PDA is what it's often called, also called extreme demand avoidance. A more neuroaffirming way of looking at it is a pervasive drive for autonomy. So it's all anxiety driven. It's an extension of extreme anxiety, and it is a profile of autism. So there's, key characteristics, common characteristics that autistics share amongst each other. And in addition, there are key features of PDA that may also be existing. And it's things like they may resist and avoid like ordinary demands of life, just simple things that that they can do, like putting their shoes on, getting ready for the day, tidying up something, getting in the car, going to school, writing in their books, like little everyday demands of life that they resist or avoid doing. They use social strategies as part of that avoidance. So they may start off going, I can't do that, my leg's broken. They may come up with little excuses. They may kind of, step into a fantasy world, use kind of distraction techniques to try and avoid the situation. They're using all of these kind of calmer approaches to control the situation in order to control the anxiety they feel about the demand that has been placed on them. And it just starts to escalate. And the more out of control they feel and the more these strategies don't work, the closer they kind of move into that kind of meltdown response. Their social interactions are kind of surface layer. They might seem like they're quite socially able, but then end up like there's kind of little depth to it. So the social interactions, it can mask the underlying social difficulties. You can see intense mood swings and emotions, intense focus on other people, either real or fictional. A need for control is a huge one. And you find that conventional approaches to supporting parenting or teaching are often ineffective. So that can be signs of PDA. Another one that I haven't written there that's common is praise. Sometimes the demand of, that when you've praised your child, sometimes the demand of that can cause the child to feel the pressure that they have to then perform and do that again. So the difference between autism demand avoidance and PDA is, like, with autism demand avoidance, they can be avoiding things because, there's sensory stimulation, or they're trying to seek sensory stimulation. Sensory overstimulation, or they're trying to seek sensory stimulation. So they're avoiding certain activities. It can be that they're struggling with transitions from one thing to another. It can be that they are confused about a certain situation and they don't want to show that they're confused, so they're trying to avoid. So there's lots of avoidance tactics that are used in autism. But in PDA, it is actually the demand itself. It's the demand of put your shoes on, let's go to the cinema, things like that actually makes them feel anxious about the task or the demand that's being asked of them. So it's avoiding them in order to control the level of anxiety that I feel. And it's almost like a shut-down response. It's not a choice for autistic children, for PDA is. It's not a choice. PDA is a question of can't, not won't. So PDA is often described as a neurological tug of war between the brain, the heart, and the body. They often know how to do things, but their body's going, no, it's a threat, not doing it. So it's a very subconscious thing, and it's a very, very difficult thing to live with that requires a lot of empathy, a lot of even re-looking at how you parent and the expectations that you have and the standards that you have. It's going to reshape all the ways you thought you would parent, because, a lot of the time we're raised with this kind of old school style of parenting where it's you listen, you do as you're told, and, you'll have to revise all of that. There's some great aspects of PDAs as well. So it's not all kind of challenging, even though their life is quite challenging. They're very tenacious. They're very empathetic, very, very loyal, and very justice oriented. So they'll stick up for their friends and they'll really stand up for the things that they believe in. Very determined, creative, imaginative, very honest. So you'll always know where you stand with a PDA. Sensitive, charismatic. So that's that social aspect that you see them that into that fantasy world, into that, looks very socially able, can be very independent. So these are really great traits that can come with PDA as well, that we can really work with and build upon to help them to thrive. Now, just a quick little tip. I'm not going to go into this in huge detail. It's a whole other topic on its own. It's something that we do cover in our program, but a change in language can help dramatically. So we often use imperative language when we're asking our child to do something. We tell them to do it, or we ask them a question, can you put your shoes on, please? Or, go get yourself a fork, or, go do your homework, time to do your homework, like all these kind of demands that we give our children. Sometimes even the routine of you leading up to a demand is very obvious to them. So you haven't even said anything and they can feel that a demand is about to be placed on them. So being aware of those sorts of things. You want to use declarative language. Declarative language is more general. It's more of a comment. It's using curiosity. It's using observations. So instead of, for example, with praise, we don't want to be using praise because that can be a demand in itself. So instead of great job cleaning your room, which can put a lot of pressure on, we might go, gee, this room looks clean, so it's not even about them. Or, instead of put your shoes on, it might be, oh, I wonder where your shoes are. Or I wonder what we need to do next to get ready for school. So it's that curiosity. So look up declarative language versus imperative language. There'll be loads of information, hopefully, that you can find on there. If not, we do it in our program. And using visual prompts around the house. So you're not telling them what to do. You might be referring to a list. What's next? Visual prompts or routine cues, sending texts to older children, or, having it written down, or having visual pictures, demonstration videos, things like that, that can really help the child to understand and be able to take that time to process what they've got to do and what they've got to do next. That was a very, very simplified overview of PDA. There's so much more we could say about PDA, and we do talk a little bit more than that in our other webinars, but just wanted to kind of stick to aggression in this particular webinar. All right. So the final thing that I really wanted to talk about is that everything that we've been doing in this whole webinar has revolved around something that we have developed called our S.U.P.E.R Framework. Now, when parents come to us, they're often talking about specific situations that they're wanting help with. So they're in the moment, they're looking for in the moment strategies. Like, for example, my child has meltdowns. What do I do when they're melting down? So those in the moment strategies are really things that you need to learn and things that we've been talking about in this webinar. But there's so many more things that we need to do outside of that to prevent those meltdowns or those behaviours, or even just to help your child to thrive in the first place. And the S.U.P.E.R framework kind of touches on a lot of things that we've talked about. I've kind of slipped in there throughout this whole webinar. And the first one is self-awareness. So what is your contribution to how you influence your child and how you're influencing their emotions and their behaviors, because we've talked a lot about your own mindset, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your behaviors, and how they are then influencing how regulated you are, how you're able to help the child, how you're able to jump in the world of your child to understand and make sense of their behaviors. Because if you're dysregulated, then your thinking brain's gone offline. You can't jump into the world of your child because your body is focused on your threats and what's going on for you. So sometimes the self-awareness element is really delving into your own mental health and what you can do to regulate your emotions and change those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, which is why we spend the first 2 weeks of the program purely focusing on you and your thoughts and your feelings and your mental health. The next step, the U step, is understanding. This is where we're understanding, what is the child thinking or feeling to be behaving this way? Let's make sense of that behavior. Let's understand what their personality is, their strengths are that we can use to build on and help them to thrive. And then the P part is the typical things we think of when we're looking for autism strategies, where we're looking for skills building, we're looking at helping them to learn new things. So this is the prepare, the plan, the teach side of things. Preparing is about helping them to anticipate what's to come, what it looks like, understanding what a situation is going to be like in their future, planning for things, teaching them new skills and new ways to look at life. Then we have the environment and the culture. So we don't want to be always thinking that the child has to change in order for their behavior to change. It's everything around it that we need to look at. Yourself, your understanding, the environment that they're in. What's their sensory environment like? Is their environment conducive to their learning style and their learning needs or their ability to feel safe? What is the culture of your home, your family environment, your classroom, your relationship? Are they getting positive messaging about neurodiversity? Are you being neuroaffirming? Are you giving them positive messages about self-worth and differences and strengths and normalizing how we make mistakes and growing from those mistakes? Are we cultivating a growth mindset? Are we creating inclusivity in our culture, in our environment, in our classroom, in our families? These are all going to go a long way in helping the child to feel safe, and safe so that thinking brain can learn about how to think, how other people think, how to engage, and how to participate in different various situations as they're learning and growing. And then the final R part is looking at everybody, all of the relationships. It's kind of the underlying basis of everything else on this S.U.P.E.R framework, because you need to have the rapport to be able to communicate with this child. You need to earn the right to be able to ask that child to do things and to have them engage with you and share with you some of the things that are going on for them. We need to build the rapport around playfulness and love and care and connection, not just when they're having difficult times, but outside of that. They need to know you get them, you like them. We know that parents love their children, but they need to know you like them too, that you love spending time with them, and you enjoy aspects of them. They need to know that they have strengths amongst all these messages, that there's deficits and there's something wrong with them, and these therapies, they can very, very easily get that message that there's something wrong with them. But if they've got people in their corner that are really seeing their strengths and their individuality and, their diversity as a positive thing, and they're loving them outside of those moments that they're being difficult and inside of their moments when they're not being difficult but having a difficult time, they're going to make a big difference, and they're going to build up relationship capital that is going to be used in these difficult moments, because they're going to see you as a sense of safety. And that goes for whether you're a parent or whether you are a professional or a teacher. That relationship and rapport is going to be really key. How you communicate with them with empathy in the moment as well, that emotion coaching I talked about before. So just wanted to be really clear on, that is a framework that we work with in our autism program. We're always looking at it from all of those different angles. So for those of you who are professionals who are interested in this information to take it a little bit further, we have our sister company called Safe to Grow, which is specifically training and resources for professionals. We actually have an Inside Autism program that we have, that's 6.75 hours of self-paced learning that elaborates on so many things that we've spoken about today. So if you're a training, a professional that wants more information, go to safetogrow.com.au. If you are a parent who loves this information or is resonating with this information, would love to learn more about what we do have our autism parenting program. We are asked a lot at the moment, can I use my child's NDIS plan? Because I thought parenting programs were out. And our answer at this stage is yes, you can, because although general parenting programs like S.U.P.E.R, Circle of Security, those sorts of things that are often available for free anyway, just in different contexts, and we all know that sometimes they don't always work in the autism space, they are out, but disability-specific parent carer training is still available, and they've actually even kept the line item that we've always billed to in the new price guide that came out post 1st of October. So it's the most recent guideline. So it means that, and we've been listening to lots of plan managers, and they're still paying our invoices. There's still, we're getting very, very little pushback only from people who don't understand this information, but there's very rarely plan managers still paying it. NDIS is still paying our invoices. So the only thing is that if you think we're the right fit for you, it might be an idea, and you got like room in your capacity building and is right for your goals, and you'll get information about whether you fit the eligibility. We do recommend that we encourage you to enroll sooner rather than later, because the NDIS is moving towards stated supports. So if you get a new plan, then those stated supports might mean that you can't access this kind of training unless it's actually stated. So you would actually have to ask for it. But at the moment, if you're on the old planning system, you can access this program through that line item, as long as you fit the criteria. So you can ask Christy any questions about that if you like. So what do we cover in our autism program? It's 30 hours of information. You also get access to my other 14 programs, all of my ebooks. You get to enroll. For the one enrollment, you actually get 2 enrollments. So if you've got your partner, an ex-partner, a support person that's with your child all the time, can be the second enrollment. If you don't have a partner, they can have 2 separate profiles, so you could be doing it together for the one fee. We do monthly group counselling sessions via Zoom, daytime and evening options, and you get unlimited lifetime access to all of this. So even when the 9-week program is over, you're still getting ongoing support. You can basically, it's delivered over 9 weeks, but you don't have to do it over 9 weeks. So it's completely up to you how you do the program. But you get lifetime access to the support, as well as counselling email support with me. So I can be asking your questions, or answering your questions rather, to help you to work through the content and how it applies to your specific family. Okay, so I went 6 minutes over. Sorry about that, guys. Thank you for giving me your attention. Those of you who need to go and don't want to stay for the Q&A, you are welcome to go. For those of you who want to stick around for the Q&A, I welcome you to post your questions now so that we can jump over. Let me just, hang on a minute. I forgot to put up this little link. Oh, hang on a minute. I just clicked on the link. I don't want to click on the link. There we go. Can you guys see all that? You should be able to see that now, that I've put that link to our website. So if you are interested in our autism program, there's loads of information, including whether your plan would be eligible for using your child's NDIS or not, and all about it, what we do, what we teach, all the rest of it. So that brings us to our Q&A sections. Okay, please guide about a child who publicly shows very aggressive or agitated behaviour, like shouting, crying and screaming in a public place. How to manage them that time. What we need to do first and foremost is to really understand what's going on for the child. They don't They don't want to be shouting, crying or screaming, particularly not in public. Most people don't want to actively do that. We need to understand what's going on for them. Is there something in that sensory environment that's triggering them? Is there too much kind of expectation? Is there too much unpredictability? Are they too tired at the time that they're out in public? What are they doing when they're in public? Are they having to socially interact? Like, what scenario are we talking here? If we're in the shopping centre, it can be too loud, it can be too overwhelming, too many colours, too stimulating, too boring. It can be that you're going at the wrong times, that they've had a full day and they just want to go home because they're tired and exhausted from masking all day. There can be a myriad of reasons why those behaviours are being shown in the first place. So the best way to manage that behaviour is to figure out how to prevent it. Like I was saying, everything that I've basically said in this webinar, you could apply to this specific question, because on one side of things we're looking at what are they thinking in order to be feeling this way and behaving this way, but at the same time, what's going on in their environment, what's going on for them in terms inside their body for them to be having this reaction. So having a look at it from that perspective to get a sense of that, so that you can then work on how we can support them when they're out in public. Because we can't give a solution until we actually understand what the real problem is. Otherwise, we're just applying the random solutions and they may or may not work because we don't actually know what the problem is. How do I identify what dysregulation looks like in girls? I think, I tend to not, even though girls and boys can present differently, everybody can present differently. I like to instead, rather than look at girls versus boys, I just like to look at the individual and get to know that individual and say, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What behaviours are their baseline? What looks like a trigger? What do they look? What happens to them in their body language, their tone of voice when they get to that triggering event and they start to escalate? What does that even look like? Like I said before, it's not always aggressive behaviours. Sometimes, and girls can be a little bit more self-aware of their surroundings. They can mask a little bit easier. They can be a little bit trickier to kind of detect that dysregulation because they've become so good at masking, so it often kind of stacks up. But boys can be like that too. It's not, and that's why I don't like to say, boys and girls. But we want to kind of really pay attention to those little nuances that happen within a person that gives us those clues as to what dysregulation looks like for them. Look at their body, look again, getting a really solid understanding of what that baseline looks like for that person or that child, so that you can start to see what happens. Their body's going to look different. Their face is going to look different. Their tone of voice, how much they say or how little they say is going to make a big difference. So looking at all of those little clues that help you understand the baseline and when they've moved away from that baseline, and also the clues as to why they moved away from that baseline. Because you can try to have conversations, and a lot of times that is helpful if your child is verbal, but if your child is non-speaking, then you're not always getting those that language to help you. You have to go into that detective mode and you have to start looking for little patterns and little clues that help you to discern what's going on for that person and why they feel dysregulated in the first place and what that dysregulation looks like. Yeah. My 9-year-old holds his emotions in at school, also medicated, comes home and the medication is worn off. What strategies do you have that we could use at home to regulate? Yeah, great question. I get asked this a lot. Again, it depends on your child, but he could go two ways. So start to kind of investigate or get a sense of or play around with what his nervous system is needing. Some kids need this kind of routine of coming down because they've been so heightened all day that they just need quiet, calm activities, maybe some space, maybe something to eat first, maybe time in their room with little interaction, maybe certain music that needs to be played or a certain activity that helps them to calm down and regulate, very low demand, helping their nervous system to just come back online. Can be like those essential oils that I said before that just helps that nervous system to calm down. Think about the things that helps him to feel calm and regulated and peaceful and soothed, activities that may help him to come back into that space before asking him to do anything. A lot of the times when we come home from school and work for the day, we're into another routine. We're into, okay, we're home, we've got to do the homework, we've got to get ready for dinner, and we've got to get ready for sports, and we've got to, do this, that, and the other. And you may still need to do all of those things, but just try to maybe do them in a calmer way, or carve out even just 5 minutes or 10 minutes to everybody just chill before we get into things. That's one side of things. The other side of things, he actually may need to run it out. His nervous system may actually need to just go like jump up and down on a trampoline, kick a ball, smash it against the wall, smash a ball against the wall, or hit a tennis racket or ball that needs that smacking motion to just kind of push that energy out. So some kids can go either way. You might need that before he then has the calmer kind of approach. They may need to eat, just putting it out there. But with the medication, he may not be hungry, or he may not have been hungry during the day, but then comes home absolutely famished. So really pay attention more to what the body is telling you it's needing, so that you're not seeing so much of that dysregulation. And sometimes just know that you can't avoid it. You can put all these strategies in place and you can think that you know your child inside and out, but something could have happened during the day that you have no clue about. You haven't had time to even discuss it. They won't discuss it. Something's wrong and they're just dysregulated. So it's just trying as much as you can to just work with that nervous system, even when you have no clue what's going on for them. Sometimes it's just the hardest thing is surrendering to the reality that you don't know, and that's okay. It's not a reflection on your parenting. The reality is just sometimes you just don't know. What's your best recommended essential oil for calming? So I used to use the Young Living brand, but I know that you can basically get calming blends from any kind of natural food shop, and there's a lot of doTERRA people around as well. The Young Living one I used to use, if you want to look it up to see what the blend was Stress Away. But I know that lavender is quite a safe one, and it also depends on your child as well, because sometimes they might be really sensitive to certain smells and it may not work. They may not like it, and for other children they absolutely love it and will ask for it. But lavender is usually a pretty safe one, but Stress Away was my go-to for myself as well as the young person that I was working with. Yeah. Our son is 46, and 4 years ago he was informed he's on the spectrum, does not have a partner, is living alone. He refuses to talk to us. When we try to contact him, he simply emails a note saying, "Leave me alone." He's achieved a lot in his life. He's been around Australia and around the world, and he has so much technical knowledge. We're trying to reconnect, and we're finding it very hard to find the right approach. Any suggestions? Yeah, I think this is a really good question because, and I think it relates to so many people, whether you have adult children or not. Be aware of, and I'm not saying this is you in this situation because I don't have enough information to know, but be aware that sometimes we have an idea of what a right life should look like. And that includes what we think our child's relationships should look like and how they should be living their life. And we are wired for connection as human beings, but sometimes, especially in autism, they may not necessarily want to be as connected to people as we think they should be. And sometimes if we think that they should have a certain level of social interactions or they should be doing certain things in their life, we can kind of come across as being judgmental. And if they have that reference point, it can be like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to interact with you, because every time we do, you just tell me that I need to be doing more of this and less of that. And, you know, I'm doing okay by my standards, and I like my life and I like what I'm doing. And even if I don't like what I'm doing, I'm still doing it my way. And I think even if you wanted to influence him exploring other opportunities, it sounds a little bit like it just needs to start with rapport building first, where it can maybe just be that you start with just, and I don't know whether he's PDA, if he's PDA, this may not work, but if he isn't PDA, if in terms of trying to reconnect, find any kind of common ground, find any kind of safe, unintrusive ways of connecting with him. It can be that you're just sharing things that are happening in your life, sharing memories of things that you are proud of him for, being curious about, or asking him a question about something that he knows. Like, he's been around Australia and around the world. That's awesome. He's got a lot of worldly knowledge. It might be, yeah, we're thinking of going on a holiday, and I was wondering what you thought about Hawaii or Bali, or is there anything that we do need to know if we were going to plan this? You know, like, find a common interest that helps to reconnect without any judgment, any opinions on his life, anything at all that helps him feel like he can kind of engage even just a little bit. Because at the moment it might be that because you're really wanting to connect with him, all of your connections are about connection as opposed to, you know, easy, demanding things that are just very trivial, very surface layer, not trying to get him to do anything other than just have trivial, general conversations, if that makes sense, and just slowly build up that rapport where you don't want anything for him and you're not trying to parent him. He's 46 years old, so you're not going to parent him anyway. He's living his own life. He's having his own journey. That's going to be full of his own highs and lows, and he may need extra support. You may not be that person to support him. He may be getting support in other ways that he's happy with, or even if he does need your support, he's not open to it right now. So your only option is to try to build rapport in a non-parenting way so that you may earn the right down the line, maybe, to then offer that, be that source of encouragement to him. But I wonder, and a lot of the time this is the case, and I don't know if it's your case, but a lot of the time things like this happen from how we are and how we have been parenting, because we're often trying to tell our kids how to run our life through our lens and not thinking about their lens and what they want. So I don't know whether any of that resonates with you, not assuming or implying that that does. Just know from doing this for such a long time, a lot of it comes from the relationship dynamics, and that we have to repair in order to be able to start building that rapport up, building that relationship capital, like I spoke about in the webinar, and how we can then slowly kind of earn that right to be back in their lives and be saying the things that we are and reconnecting in the ways that you're wanting to. How do you manage a child's meltdowns when they bite themselves and run into walls? I take him to safety and he seeks it out again. Any ideas? Yeah, so it might be that so again, two aspects to this. Firstly, kind of it's the prelude to that happening, trying to work out what the trigger was and what you can do to prevent it from happening. Now, sometimes you don't know that until afterwards when you reflect back. So don't always think, I should have known, I should have been able to prevent it. Sometimes we need the situation in order to learn from it, in order to be able to go, what was happening before that? What was happening during that? What happened after that? And where are the clues? What was he saying? What was he doing before, during, and after? Let's kind of have a look at that situation and get a sense of what was triggering him in the first place to have that kind of reaction. That's the first element to it, so that we can try to put some preventative measures in place. But the second thing is look at what the nervous system is trying to do. They're trying to bite themselves. They're trying to feel something. So sometimes it can be that maybe they can feel that in a different way. Maybe it's the sharpness that he's trying to feel, or the compression that he's trying to feel, or even just the movement aspect of it. Like, what do you think he's trying to achieve by biting himself and running into walls? Like, it's really got this kind of, yes, it's kind of a self-harm element to it, but often self-harm serves a purpose, even though it's something that we want to obviously redirect and change, but it serves a purpose. It serves a soothing purpose. So if we can help him to soothe in another way when he feels this way, so he's not having to do that, that's what's going to be helpful to him, because his body, his nervous system is going, I'm feeling this emotion, and hurting myself is a way of trying to reduce that emotion, because sometimes it can actually change the focus of what I have my attention on. And for some people who get into that self-harm, it can actually release a I can't remember what hormone it was. Is it? Can't remember, but I know that it can actually release a certain hormone that can actually help you feel good. Pretty sure it's not oxytocin though, because oxytocin is the love hormone. But there is, someone might say it in the chat somewhere that I've heard that before. But it can actually be a sense of stress relief. So if we're actually helping him to redirect that stress relief to something else, then, and maybe there's other ways that you can help him to apply pressure or soothe that. You just have to play around with different things that his body might like in order to be able to soothe and deal with that emotion that's coming up for them. Yeah, I need some advice for a 15-year-old girl with anxiety and possibly ADHD and PDA. She's secretly gone off her medication and is very unregulated and violent towards me. Yeah, the teenage years are really difficult because their brain and their bodies are doing some really crazy stuff to prepare themselves for adulthood. The brain is rewiring and breaking off synaptic pruning, doing synaptic pruning in order to try and get the brain a little bit more organized. And the autism brain is often not talking to each other in a regulated way anyway, so this can cause even more confusion. And then the hormones of going through puberty and changing can make behavior erratic anyway, emotions erratic anyway. I found a lot of the success that parents have with teenagers is sometimes just stepping out of micromanagement mode that we needed to be in when they were younger and they didn't have that logic and reasoning side of brain, and stepping into more of a guidance role where we're talking more about what is it that they're wanting, what is it that they're trying to achieve, and how can you help. Now, if she's unregulated and violent towards you, we may also need to look at the relationship dynamics between the two of you. Sometimes if we've been in that micromanagement, and I don't even mean micromanagement as trying to be authoritarian, sometimes parents find that because their child needs a lot of extra help and assistance and support, and you really want to do the best for them, sometimes you unknowingly get over-involved in their lives or over-involved in wanting to help them and fix their problems and solve their problems. And then when they get to these teenage years and they know it all and they don't want your help and you still try to give it, and then they end up in this kind of battle between the two of you, sometimes it can kind of start to break down the relationship. And we're really needing to start to work a little bit more on that rapport building. Again, like I just said in the last question, finding those really simple ways to engage with her, not in the big issues. Often what we find parents try to do is every time they interact, they're trying to tell their child what to do, or they're trying to give them advice, or they're trying to help them to solve a problem, or they're trying to, correct some sort of behavior they don't like to see or think they need to do in order to be a good human. So, it's not a bad thing that we want that for our children, but sometimes it can actually become the dominant thing that we do with our kids. And what we need to do is actually remember to play with them, remember to have fun, remember to be interested in what it is and who they are, who they're becoming, what their choices are, respecting their choices, respecting their preferences. If she's gone off her medication, it's finding out why. It's being curious. It's not being judgmental about it because you think that she should be on it. She might need to be on it, and that might be the reality. But you saying you need to be on it, get back on it, is not helping her. It's actually going to send her in the other direction. But actually being curious, and from that I get you perspective, let's hear what you've got to say. Let's understand how you're thinking, how you're feeling, how you're behaving, how I can help you, how we can be in this together, so that it's no longer you trying to dictate her life, but you working with her, understanding her, knowing what she's wanting, knowing what she's trying to achieve, caring for her, loving her, liking her, being interested in her, valuing her, finding all the things that you love about her and genuinely wanting to spend time with her. Even if she's pushing back on that at the moment, it could be a slow burn into building that relationship back up, out of context of the arguments. It can be that you're just sending her a little text that says, oh, I saw this and thought that would be, thought that you'd like that. It could be a little caring gesture where you make her favorite dinner, or you do something to just start to give her the message, I love you, I care about you, I like you, I'm here with you. And having those little conversations about everyday life, sitting down watching a movie together, or, making a comment on something that she's reading or listening to, or some sort of success that she's had, or, she might look nice and you might comment on, oh, I really like that outfit, or something like that, that just connects you on a very simplified, everyday level, that just builds up that relationship capital that earns you the right to then be able to talk about those challenging issues. But you're going to have to start to give her evidence that you're not, when you're talking about those challenging things, or those, those issues or things you think are issues, that you're not getting into that do it my way kind of perspective, but you're more talking to her about what she wants, how we can get it, what she thinks is working, what she thinks isn't working, offering other perspectives for her to consider, as opposed to telling her, well, don't do that because X, Y, and Z, because it's going to feel like she's being told what to do, and teenagers don't like being told what to do. And then my last thing about teenagers is that you're going to have to do all of that in this tiny little window, because teenagers have a window and they open it and then they close it really quickly. So you get in there when the window's open, you have your little chat, and that could be like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, they close the window, you're done. Don't personalize it. It's just the way that it is with teenagers. It's just getting back to everyday life, finding those really subtle, indirect ways to reconnect and let them know, I love you. I'm still over here loving you. So, not over the top, genuinely, just little things. Think about what her love language is, whether it's acts of service, physical touch, gifts, words of affirmation, or quality time. Think about what her love language is, and try to just do really subtle things and sometimes obvious things that help her to get that message that I am loved by you, and start to build up that rapport, so that you can kind of have those conversations about what's going on for her in terms of why it makes sense to her to come off that medication, and also what's going on for her when she's feeling so dysregulated and angry towards you. Sometimes we have to hear it, hear what they've got to say. You don't have to agree with it, but sometimes if they feel safe enough to be able to express why they feel so angry towards you, sometimes there's some home truths in that we kind of need to listen to. But as a parent, we sometimes just see the crime in their behavior and the behavior that's going on. We go, oh, that's not okay that you behave that way. But we need to sit back and go, Why does it make sense that she's behaving that way towards me? It could actually just be that you're her safe person, but sometimes it can also be that there's something in the dynamics that needs to be understood and shifted. So hopefully that kind of makes sense to you. Okay, so I think that we have run out of time. I'm so sorry. I know that there's so many questions there and we could probably be on for another 2 hours to answer them. If you're really interested in our stuff, please reach out and have a look at our autism parenting program. We'd love to have you on the next round. So reach out to us. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. Thank you so much for staying engaged with us and staying on for so long. Appreciate your time. I know it's not always easy to come along to these things. So take care, guys, and bye for now.